Oh yeah, sexy biscuits. Nice.
Long was 1975. A YouTuber's on the rise. Reviewing games and sometimes friends. But Long was 1975.
Hey YouTube, Lawn Boys Post 1975 and welcome to a weekly random vlog. I say random, but at this point you know it's going to have nostalgia in it somewhere because that's a good thing to talk about. And as always, it's in the ticking clock. If you don't like ticking clocks, you know my thoughts on that. But what do I want to talk about this week? I want to talk about jumble sales because is that still a thing? Obviously fundraising is still a thing. I know that fates, you know, school fates, church fates, Paris fates are a thing where you have stalls, games, and there'll be little sort of, you know, tables and stalls set up with people selling, you know, bric-a-brac and things like that. I get that that's still a thing, but our jumble sales, which are basically, you know, fundraisers for, back in the day, for me, they were either fundraisers for basically the local Paris Hall, Community Hall, or School Hall, because it was usually one of those three things. And obviously it was an expensive place to run. People could meet there during the week and have events there and stuff like that. But in order for the overheads to be met, they'd have to have constant fundraisers and stuff like that. And the most common of these would be a jumble sale. So it would be basically like the bric-a-brac store you would get at a fete, on a massive scale, like the whole of the town hall, or village hall I should say, in our cases, would be devoted to basically bric-a-brac. You might have a table for home bakes and things like that, but you know, it would be clothes, books, comics, toys, everything. It was utterly fantastic. And I have very, very fond memories of them. Both my brothers do as well. When we were young kids, my mum used to take us to them, not because we were like particularly destitute or poor or anything like that, although it was pretty pricey raising three boys, but it was like a little event. It was cool. It was a way to, you know, entertain your kids at the weekend on a Saturday or a Sunday. And yeah, I have so many warm fuzzy memories of it. And lots of people I've been finding out recently have a complete snobbery about it. Like they turn their nose up. Like, you went to jumble sales when you were a kid? Yep. Oh man, that's sad as fuck. Like, seriously, what were you, poor? And it's like, dude, you go to charity shops, not the same thing, is the same thing. And you go to car boot sales, not the same thing, is the same thing, only they're outside. Like, seriously, where does this snobbery come from for it? But the reason I want to talk about this is, reminiscing about it and stuff like that was kind of triggered when someone asked me, someone online, which is, you know, what do I go, you know, did my love of charity shops, because I do love charity shops, you've only got to know that, see my posts on Facebook, which is, you know, my charity shop t-shirt gods posts and stuff like that, because I've found many a blinder of a t-shirt in a charity shop. And yeah, so where did my love of charity shops come from? Is it because I'm a retro gamer? And it would be no. It literally started because of jumble sales when we were like sort of, I'm guessing 8, 9 and 10, and then it progressed from there, that whenever I saw charity shops based on these amazing finds I would have in jumble sales, I'd always go in them. I'd always go with them. I'd always go straight to the book stand and root through it for comics, because I got so many comics from charity shops, and obviously definitely for jumble sales, and I'll talk about that because that definitely inspired my love of comics, you know, before I started collecting US comics and stuff like that. Obviously, I got the Beano forever, you know, as a kid, and Transformers UK, but there were so many other titles that I got into and started ordering regularly from the village post office, because I managed to buy a chunk of them from a jumble sale. And yeah, like I said, I don't understand like the stigma that some people have now that we're adults attached to them. I remember my brother had a girlfriend, and this is probably like 20, maybe 25 years ago, and he was telling us one day that when he told her, and she was from quite a well-off family, when he told her that, you know, our mum used to take us to charity shops as kids, she was like horrified, like absolutely horrified. And my brain was just thinking, like, why would you do that? I mean, it's very much of the ilk, which if you got wealth, buy everything brand new. Good for you. We all need life goals. Not for me. Like I mean, I've never bought a new car in my life. Every car I've ever bought is second hand. I don't see the point in new shit. The closest I get to new shit is video game consoles. And then obviously, you know, if you see my YouTube channel, I buy a shitload of second hand stuff. But the point is, it's not a reflection of an individual if they go to these places, if they buy second-hand stuff. I hate that stigma. I really, really do. Like, you're really, truly missing out on some great shit, and also kind of a great communal experience. So, earliest memories would be that down the road, Backwell had a hall. You had two halls actually, one a new hall and an old hall, and they were, I don't know if they were different parts of the community because they were right next to each other. One was a little higher and one was a little lower. And I just remember, you know, sort of mid, like this is probably around about 85, 86 and stuff like that. My mum used to take us there on a Saturday if I wasn't working, or a Sunday, because they literally were Saturday or Sunday, as a way just to kill, you know, some time and stuff like that. And a good way to maximise, you know, your pocket money, because you never knew what you'd get in these places. Like, you're not going to get Transformer or stuff like that. I did see some He-Man toys there, you know, and things like that. It was more sort of tabletop stuff and things like that. But the point was, it was like a little event, and I loved it. You know, I'm very, like I said, very fond memories of this, because you'd have to queue up, and obviously, the earlier you got there, the closer you were to the front, the better you were for, you know, bagging yourself the better shit. And it was kind of like Boxing Day sales. This is as close as I ever got to Boxing Day sales. And never fucking understand people who do Boxing Day sales. Just fucking stay at home and enjoy Christmas, for fuck's sake. And also, if you're telling me that you're going to find stuff cheaper than Amazon Prime, no. But yeah, and we would never get there super early, but we stand there. I'd have a comic. I'd go over the road. There's a newsagent. I think it's an estate agent now. Newsagent over the road. I'd buy a comic and stand there in the queue. And you'd have to pay. So obviously everything in here, the community had donated themselves. So clothes, you know, toys, books, games. Comics could be considered in books. There'd be a bake-off, you know, a section, as I said, like that. There'd be refreshments where you could literally buy a cup of orange squash and a biscuit for 10p. Sounds like, you know, fucking archaic, but don't knock it. It was banging. And yeah, and yeah, so you wait, and it'd be like, we open our doors at 2. And obviously also because all the money was donated from all the bric-a-brac and stuff that they sold, to maximise the profit, they'd, because obviously they're renting the hall at this point for this, aren't they? They would charge you something like, was it 50p to get in? Everyone would have to pay 50p to get in, and you saw some big lines. I'm not talking around the block and Star Wars size and shit like that, but you know, going down through the car park and stuff like that. And yeah, and you get in, and then my mum would just look like, you know, sort of like the house stuff and things like lamps and nice, you know, and plates that you can hang on the wall and pictures and stuff like that, and things to put by the fire. She was like, she's not really interested in the clothes and shit like that. Maybe the handbags. And we were never interested. And she never really bought clothes for us there, unless she, you know, she saw something like, you know, we can use that for school. Again, expensive having 3 kids. But yeah, so she looked through the bric-a-brac and stuff to, like, you know, decorate, you know, your home, personalise your home with. We were just like boom straight to the toys. And the reason I guess it's called Jumble Sale is because literally, this is where it would be different than charity shop, more in line with a car boot sale. Stuff was just piled on top of stuff. Like if you did go to the clothes, you'd have to root around like that. And people got competitive. I do remember that. People got competitive, and if you got to the front, you had to hold the line with your brothers. Seriously, because there were some banging toys to get here, and the people behind the counter, and all the tables would go all the way around the outside. This was uniform for every Jumble Sale I ever went to as a kid. None of them, like, there was never tables in the middle. I mean, maybe that was a fire thing. I don't know, but you know, it's the mid-80s. We weren't all pussies back then. Like, you wouldn't have left even if there was a fire. But yeah, you get to the front of the table and then you rummage and shit like that. And I can remember like the board games and stuff like that, tabletop board games I got, and they'd make the people who were there would all be donating their time for free. They'd probably get free drink and biscuits and shit like that. Big deal in the 80s, especially if, when did hobnobs come out actually? Because I wouldn't have devoted my time for anything less than a fucking hobnob. And a can of Tango. But they'd make the prices up. You go, how much is this? I don't know why I did that like a Victorian. And they just make it up and go, 20p, and you give it to them, then you rub your hair and say, get out of it, you little scamp. They didn't do that. But yeah, and so that was kind of cool. That was exciting. And yeah, so I remember I bagged, I mean, you were taking a risk. You never really knew until you got home whether they were complete in box and shit like that. And I'm pretty sure, like, you know, this is a thing now. I mean, let's be honest. People who go to fucking car boot sales, people who go there to trade and shit, they like all their prices are based off eBay and shit like that. Internet ruined shit like this because there was a charm to people really not knowing what you had and you just banging an absolute bargain. So I got Connect 4. Connect 4 was complete. That was absolutely banging. Remember the box? I had it as a kid, but lost the pieces. So I bought it again from a Jumble Sale, and the kid had a pudding bowl haircut on the front and bad teeth. It was like frozen forever in time like this. I remember I got Downfall. Downfall was the boss. It was a safe cracking game, wasn't it? Where you had to get your coloured dots from the top down to the bottom, chips I should say, by turning dials. But your holes, awkward, were offset against the other side where your opponent was doing it. So you could be thinking that you were getting yours from the top to the bottom really quickly, but then you'd be moving his. I can't remember if you randomised it, but I just remember the adverts for it making it look amazing and really tense and shit like that. And like every movie you ever seen or TV show where they're safe cracking. And got that from like a Jumble Sale, and it was complete for like 25p. That was banging. Got numerous buckaroos, and none of them would work. They'd always fire off. It wasn't until I was an adult a couple of years ago that I bought a buckaroo from a charity shop, a vintage one, and it actually worked. But yeah, there was always a rule that if you went to any Jumble Sale, the buckaroo would not fucking work, hence the fact that they gave it there. Jumble Sales would always have Kerplunk. Who remembers Kerplunk? You could always bag a Kerplunk. A Jumble Sale. Got a bunch of operations from there. I don't mean I had surgery, but a bunch of the board game operations. They would have been vintage ones because some of them didn't work. And then one day my dad just cleaned it up because it was all corroded and shit like that. I think that was 50p, and that was banging because my older brother Jason had it, but because we were really young at that point, we lost all the shit. And then I bagged one from a Jumble Sale that had all the shit. Brilliant. And Tank Command. I bagged Tank Command. Who remembers Tank Command? You know when you used to buy those bag of army men, like think the things, the literal army men from the PlayStation games and in Toy Story. You used to buy bags of them, and you still can to be fair, like a big bag like that. You just have loads of them, and there'd be various poses, pointing like that. Binoculars man holding a rifle, even on the end was completely bent down like that. And sometimes you get equipment, and they were like really cheap and stuff like that, and vehicles, and you would get tanks. And this is what they used in this game, and you had 2 rows of tanks either side. And you had to pick, like it was basically Battleship, but when you pulled the cord like that, if you hit your opponent's tank, it'd fly off the board. The advert made it look like, look a lot more exciting than it actually was. But it was still a banging game. Then there was the Haunted House game where you built it out of cardboard. This was at every Jumble Sale, but we loved it. And you moved your pieces around the board that were moulded plastic figures in different colours. And then if you landed on a certain square, you drop a marble down the chimney in the middle and it would roll around randomly and shoot out and knock your people down. That was great. You always got board games from these places, and definitely, and I'll talk about another one, but can't go too many into the products that I purchased because other than the comics and board games, can't really remember that many. Just remember the experience though, being there at the front like that and holding literally holding your line with your brothers and the excitement, like how much is this? How much is this? Bunch of toy cards. Always loved toy cards and stuff like that. My brother Ian bought a tabletop cricket game. And it was brilliant because they had a double surprise. All the cricket pieces were there. It wasn't like test match. Remember that when you actually had the whole ramp like that connected to the bowler's arm, and you drop the ball down and the batter would go. Look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. That was a banging board game. There was so much more imagination back then because of the lack of technology. But he had this tabletop cricket game. You put this green piece of felt out and you set up like these people, and then you like flick a ball at them and stuff like that. But what we found out underneath was when you picked it up like this, so no one ever checked it there. He paid 10p. There was like fucking 30 Chinese bangers in the bottom, and my parents found out. So we got to use them, but they supervised us. But I just remember my dad made a mud mortar, shoved a bunch of bangers in a metal tube from his garage, shove it in the mud like that, and just launch it over the hedge. Good times. But yeah, and so toy cars, shit like that. You get a few of the older kind of action figures. There'd be Action Men there. There'd be Action Men vehicles and stuff like that, because that was obviously drifting out of popularity. But we still fucking loved it. Action Man uniform, gun packs, stuff like that. Yeah, Action Man was banging. And also, and I wish, 2 things I want to talk about. I wish I still had these. I blew one of them up with some of the bangers. I had a boxed $6 Million Man. Remember that? Boxed $6 Million Men. They were like You know, like everybody's rocking all shit now and going for big money. They're collectible. Not then. Every jumble sale I was at as a kid, especially these ones in Backwell, they were like once a month, guaranteed once a month. Always $6 million men there. But this one was boxed. He had the hole, he had the presser on the back of his head. You could pull up his rubber arm, there was metal underneath. Also, I managed to bag the next month the backpack. He had a plastic backpack that you'd open the bottom, pull this metal cord out, and you could plug it in the back of his head. But yeah, I had a box one of him. Complete, full like jumpsuit, you know, rubber shoes, stuff like that. No instructions, don't need instructions. I'm fucking 9. And my brothers both got one. Yeah, they were like really common. Action Men and $6 Million Man were really, really common. And like I said, you know, obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I don't know why I say I wish I kept them because I was 9. But yeah, so this was banging. But the other thing, like I said, book stand, always a bunch of comics. So I'm getting a Beano regularly at this point, and Transformers. But I remember at one point, I got a whole bunch of Action Force, or G.I. Joe, if you want to be specific about it, comics. It only ran for 50 issues. And I managed to bag about 30 of them, and it was literally 30 of them, and they were rolled up. I hated this, even as a kid, rolled up with a couple of elastic bands on, so it was like a brick, like that. Obviously, UK comics are a lot thinner, but a lot bigger as well. And obviously, this all got me into American comics, and I like Transformers as well, obviously, which I did get from the news station. So I knew of Action Force, but I couldn't have too many comics, you know, because my mum, obviously twins and older brother and stuff like that, all the, you know, the comic and magazine bill, because we were getting Sinclair user Crash magazine as well, and you're Sinclair at this point. The bill started to build up, you know, quite quickly. But yeah, and it wasn't an entire run. I think it was like 1 to 10. Then there was a couple of in the 20s, and some in the 30s, pinch of the 40s, and then like literally the last issue. But why it was so good was it had the American reprints of the Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow origin, and these I do wish I kept, because I've tried to find it in graphic novel form and stuff like that, but I think it was referred to as the Snake Eyes trilogy, and it starts with, you know, what was it, the Hard Master, the Soft Master, and obviously after Vietnam, when Snake Eyes is, you know, spoilers, horrifically disfigured, he goes to train with this family, and then Zartan kills the Hard Master, does it dressed as Storm Shadow, and so Snake Eyes goes to hunt him down. So Snake Eyes joins Action Force, and, well, it's G.I. Joe, this is a reprint, and then Storm Shadow wants to clear his name, but he also wants to find the killer of the Hard Master, or Soft Master. It's been a while, I can't remember. This was just like literally page by page turning fantastic, compelling excitement. This is one of the best Action Force stories ever. And so he works his way up through the ranks of Cobra, because he knows he's an individual in Cobra because he was Zartan. And yeah, so I bought a whole bunch of Action Force, and that led me to subscribe, for when that was cancelled, to Action Force Monthly, which was never as good, even though it was a big thick one like that. Got a whole bunch. That was going to these jumble sales in either of these Backwell halls. And obviously there'd be sports centres and Avon and stuff like that. I'm referring to the Backwell ones, but we went to a lot of them as a kid, including the one in Felton Village Hall, which was like one that everyone made a beeline for. That one was like generally considered to be like one of the best local ones. People put that on their calendar. I don't know what it was. Just people gave a lot of good shit to that one. I remember I got a bunch of remember the Fisher Price kind of action range, not the big chunky guys. There was one that was kind of more for adults, and you had this yellow and green van with a roof rack that had a canoe on it, and in the back there was a motorbike, and the characters always had one hand like that and one hand like that, and they were like kind of set, like their legs were like that, so they were kind of like that, so they kind of stand up, sit in the canoe, sit in the truck, or sit on the bike. Got the complete van and shit from that one. That was banging. I think that was something like 50p. Never approached a pound. But anyway, so in one of these, I remember I bought a bunch of 2000 AD back issues. Didn't even know what 2000 AD was at this point. Didn't even know what Judge Dredd was. Didn't even know what Road Trooper was. And buying 2000 AD back issues, because literally people would just give everything to these places, and they weren't snobby like some charity shops are now. They just put it out, because if they couldn't flog it, they trash it. And so, you know, one man's trash is another man's gold. But yeah, when I bought that wad of 2000 ADs, that changed my life. Became forever fucking obsessed with 2000 AD. Begged my mum to put that onto the order list from the local shop, because I had, you know, enough part-time jobs to be able to buy it myself, but to know that it was ordered and you would get it every week was an important thing. But yeah, and the ones I remember were, it was when Ronald Reagan was beamed into the future by bad guys or terrorists, and so Johnny Alpha and Durham Red were in charge of protecting him. That's just fucking mind blowing. And obviously, was it the hit series of Road Trooper then, or it was probably prior to that, like, you know, New Earth Memories and stuff like that. But and also seeing Judge Dredd for the first time. This was just insane. I'm like, how did I not know this existed? This is the most amazing comic in the world. Managed to one day buy a massive bunch of Eagle comics as well, when it was the second iteration of the Eagle, because it went out of print from its original 50s run, then came back for a second time, sadly out of print now, and got into that, like Doom Lord. And that's where I found out about Computer Warrior, where the kiddie would get sucked into a different US Gold game. For every story. So yeah, so they did some weird ones. They did Bionic Commando. They did Metrocross, the running game. Yeah, they had to invent some weird stories for that. But yeah, and that's where I got into that. And as a kid who was like, had a ZX Spectrum, that was brilliant. That was like, oh my god, there's computer games, they're a comic book, but they're real games. It's relevant. And one day, to make extra money in the hall that was left of the back row one, the main hall that was high, if you remember what I said at the start of the video, they even had like a separate room. It was the cloakroom, and they had a bunch of kids set up their ZX Spectrums. And we had a ZX Spectrum then, but it was still cool because, like you could go in there and take a break from, like, holding the line, if you will, and pay 20p for 5 minutes, and each kid would have a different game running. We were playing stuff like Bugaboo and Jumping Flash and stuff like that, and so that was brilliant. Jumble Sale, Saturday afternoon, orange squash, biscuit, little bit of ZX Spectrum action going on. Honestly, like when people turn their nose up at shit like this, these were fucking brilliant times. These were fun times. Even if you never bought anything, it was still a little trip out and like a good day out and fun, stuff like that. And obviously we would go to the local shops and stuff like that, because back was just up the road from Nelsey, and they had a little, newsagent with a little computer section going on and stuff like that, and a bunch of later on, a bunch of charity shops. But yeah, just so many great memories of all this stuff we bought, like the board games, but the comics was the big one. Always managed to buy stuff like a big bunch of Whizzer and Chips. That was a classic, sadly deceased now. Beezer, that was a classic. Chipper, and sometimes they'd even know that, just give you a random selection, like pay 10p for 10 random comics. And the thing is, right, so it'd be like 9.85, and you could get Beanos there, so I was always on the lookout, even as a kid, for expanding my Beano collection, back issues. And like people didn't know then that they should be hanging on to at least the Beanos. You could buy Beano books as well. I've always collected Beano books even since I was very young. My Beano book collection's on the house insurance. It's big shit, so don't be getting any ideas, all right? But yeah, always went to the book section, not just for comics, but look for Beano books. Definitely look for Beano books, and that's where the majority of those books I still have, all sealed in plastic with silicone gel in boxes. Came from. But they had no idea that this stuff would be truly collectible, much like most things back then. So you could go in 1985, you'd be buying Beano comics, and I still have these actually. So some of these comics I still have from the 70s and the 60s. In fact, the oldest that I bought from a bloke from his shed collection, Beano I have, is from the 40s. So I have Beanos that have Biffo the Bear on the front. And yeah, so yeah, Beano books, the Whizzer Chips, stuff like that. And Dandies, obviously, I was always a Beano kid, but if I came across Dandies in the wild, which would always be in these Jumble Sales, I'd always buy a Dandy. So yeah, when I was to explain this to someone the other day, and they were being really snobby about it, because quite a few people are, I guess they must have had very boring childhoods. I just got so nostalgic, just remember, and then when you rushed home, it was like, you'd chuck your haul out, because your mum would give you a carrier bag and you buy this shit, and then you get home, it was like reverse second-hand store buying Halloween. That phrase got away from me. Yeah, and you shake your shit out and you go for it, and you find out if it was complete and stuff like that, and you see what your brother's bagged, and you'd be super jealous sometimes and things like that. Because I remember my twin brother actually bought a pair of the proper old school roller skates, but it's 85, remember that? Where you stuck your foot in them, but it was their straps there and there, pre-roller boots. In fact, I don't think these fuckers even had stoppers on the front or the back. But we weren't pussies back then, remember? So yeah, I have very fond nostalgic memories of like all these, and like I said, it was always to raise funds for like the parish hall or a school, in which case they just use their school hall, community hall, things like that. Because like I said, these community places were expensive, but I never understood that as a kid. It was just like, we're going to go to a jumble sale this afternoon. Bring your pocket money, you might find something cool. And we were generally like, toys, yes, but me, comics. Definitely comics. And like I said, that day when there was ZX Spectrum games being played, everyone bought a TV and a Spectrum in. Nice little bonus. You never knew what you were going to get, basically. You never knew what you were going to get. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So when people say like, do they still do this? They must still do this for like schools and shit. They have to. And if they do, I really would like to go again for old time's sake. But would it all be priced like eBay and like charity shops down? So kind of the fun, and love of it would be removed. But yeah, when people turn their nose up at it, no different than a car boot sale, but you're not fucked if it rains. And yeah, no different than a charity shop. It's just not on hangers and shit, and you might want to wash it when you get it home. Anyways, I'd love to know what you think. Did you, do you even know what they were? Did you go to them as a kid? I think it is a very generational thing. I do think it's a Generation X thing, like my generation, I really do. But I would love to know, or I've just talked, even by my standard, utter bollocks for 20 odd minutes about something no one else even did. Anyway, as always, I'd love to know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later.